thrilled to welcome Grace Mathew, celebrated as one of Australia's 100 brightest young minds and a beacon of transformative leadership. From her early days engaging large audiences to pioneering global partnerships, Grace has been a force for positive change. Her leadership has significantly impacted both the non-profit sector, notably with Mercy Ships, and the corporate world through strategic roles like the managing director of WeThink. Grace's dedication to impactful innovation and community service has earned her prestigious accolades, including the Goldman Sachs Global Leader Award. Join us in exploring the journey of this inspiring leader, Grace Mathew. So, Grace, can you paint a picture of a pivotal moment that sparked your passion for community service and leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was 2006 that I read a report that changed my life. Bill and Melinda Gates and Bono were being chosen as Time's Person of the Year, the combined Person of the Year. And there was a Time magazine article detailing how they had taken this quite commercial approach to alleviating poverty and AIDS in Africa by assessing the most economically viable use of their funds and bringing what would typically be seen as commercial acumen to what had been the domain of nonprofits. And the article talked about how they had been shrewd about doing good, and they were rewiring justice and politics, re-engineering justice and making mercy smarter and hope strategic and daring the rest of us to follow. And I remember I was a teenager, I was fresh out of high school. I was embarking on a year of self-discovery, travel, aid work, and I was so excited reading this article. I was reading about what they were doing to strategize hope in the midst of devastating poverty. And I remember just dancing around my room with this magazine in my hand. And I think I still have the article. It's so old now. But I remember reading and thinking, you know what, young people, individual human beings who may have come from, no special background, have so much potential and so much ability to create change. And so that day I stood in my room, I sat down and I started writing a kind of a vision for my life and what I wanted to see in the world. And I found myself I just allowed my mind to just explore possibilities unconstrained by boundaries or challenges. And it was actually interesting because after that, the year that I had ahead of me would really afford me opportunities to put some of that into practice in travels to India and far north Queensland and various places around the world where I was able to go and really serve the communities that were in the greatest need. And I realized that as I watched people who worked in these communities day in, day out, who gave their lives, and then whenever we would give them something, they would give it away. Like I remember we were in India, my mother gave a handbag to this woman who led this very large scale community development project. Her handbag was falling apart. My mother gave her a new one. And then the next day we said to her, why aren't you using your new handbag? She was still using her old one. And she said, a woman came to us and she had nothing. And I couldn't keep this for myself. I mean, this woman had so little herself, and yet she was so moved to give everything. And I realized that, it actually just takes humility and commitment that any one of us can be like that drop in the bucket that will actually, be the tipping point for someone's life and bring them hope. And so it was really actually, a combination of sort of seeing how my parents led by example, but also reading that article, amongst many other things, that led me to be quite inspired about, the ability for a human being to change the world.
Yeah, great. The part which actually struck me is you wrote it down. I think this generation should write it down rather than keeping it, or that's something which is like a takeaway there, writing it down, your dreams.
Yeah, I think that like when we write down our dreams and when we write down vision, life never goes the direction that we think it will go. It never quite takes the linear path. And so it's really helpful when we have something that we've written down. I know I sometimes go back, I read these things that I wrote down when I was a teenager or when I was a child, and it reminds me of the way that I used to dream before I was disappointed, before life got me down. And I think it's really healthy for us to reset and be reminded of hope without the lens that sometimes comes when you're an adult. So yeah, completely agree. Write it down.
Right then, yeah. So, which takes me to the next one. So, growing up, who served as your role models? You definitely said that story. And how did their influence shape your journey to becoming one of Australia's 100 brightest young minds? That's like a wow, wow.
I mean, you know what? My parents are my heroes, and they're the heroes of, I think, many, many people around the world. Um, they, from such a young age, I watched them. I didn't just watch them actually, because they really took us on the journey with them. They have poured out their lives in service of humanity. I don't know many people in the world who are more selfless and more consistent and committed and ethical and integrous than my parents. I think I've got the best parents in the world. Um, but they really they took me and my siblings with them when they would go. They, I mentioned the travels to India, which is where my dad's from. He'd spent many years serving the Indian communities that were impoverished before he moved to Australia in his mid-20s to pursue further studies, and then he met my mum here. But growing up, they didn't just leave us kids behind. When we had people at the dinner table who were doing amazing things, there was never a kids' table. They would sit us at the table with them and we'd take part in the adult conversations. They encouraged us to speak up. They did a lot of public speaking around the world. They would always put a microphone in our hands, and even if it was just to say one thing, they really encouraged us to have a voice. And I know that, I mentioned my travels to India, but my parents, from a very young age, they were involved in quite grassroots reconciliation efforts with the Indigenous Australians, and just watching them bring together groups of people where there had been fragmented relationship and generational trauma and offense that ran really deep, and watching how they, with such great love and compassion and humility, mediated between people and between people groups even, and brought a sense of wholeness at a spiritual level, not just at a physical level, and really, really ministered to people's deepest needs and emotions. And I think that's something that I've really taken with me in terms of how I relate to people and how I work with people, because I realize, as much as we all have high level interests, people want to maybe grow their businesses or see their families do well, or they want to achieve things. Really, at a base level, what drives us is where our heart is and the state of our souls and our hearts. And I think when you connect with people on that more human, fundamental level, that's where you see great change, and that's where you see deep partnerships take root. And that's what I watched my parents do, and many, many other people along the way, but they are definitely my heroes.
Amazing, amazing. So, at just 15, you started presenting to large crowds. Can you recount your first experience addressing a significant audience and how it shaped your public speaking skills? What are some tips to engage people when you are public speaking?
Yeah, so I mentioned, my parents who really took me and my siblings on this journey with them.
Yeah.
And they were my sort of foray, they were my inroad into the world of public speaking and addressing large crowds. I think, I had quite a high level of church involvement as well, which gave me opportunity to engage with larger groups of people. And that's formed part of my life since I was quite a young teenager. Now, one of the things that I've learned, I think there are a couple of things actually, but one of the things that I learned is you want to start strong and you want to tell a story. People don't always remember the facts that you tell them, but everyone remembers a good story. It's just how we are as humanity. We're a storytelling people. And the other thing is, I was chatting with a girl yesterday who is chairing a panel next week. And she said, I don't know why I always get so nervous when I get up and do public speaking. And I said, I used to feel that way, and I still do to an extent. But there was this one time that I was speaking, at an event in Australia, and I was so nervous. And as I started to dwell on what was I going to say and plan the way the evening would go, I stopped for a moment. I realized that the reason I was feeling self-conscious was because I was self-conscious. I was so conscious of myself, of the way that I would appear, what would people think of me? And really, it wasn't about me. Like, I was there to share something that would hopefully inspire others and help them on their journey. So as soon as I stopped being conscious of myself and started being conscious of the others that I was hoping to impact, my focus switched from myself to the message. And immediately my nerves dissipated. And I told this to this girl as well yesterday, and she said to me, oh, that's such a game changer, because I think when you focus on the intended beneficiary of your speech, of whatever it is that you're saying, and the message, the core message, really focusing on making sure that it reaches its purpose, that's when you're able to more comfortably speak and also engage with people, again, at that more human level, rather than it just being a performance. I think anyone can tell when it's just a performance and it's not, you sort of switch off the TV when someone is making a speech like that. So, yeah.
Okay. So that's amazing that you're still able to help people, like that selflessness, I would say, like, which comes out from you is like amazing.
Thank you.
People would never want to share that trick, I would say, with anyone, but
I'm happy to share. Like, if you come onto something that helps you, I'm the first person to say to everyone, this is what you should do. Like, it helps me. You should give it a try too. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so winning the prestigious Goldman Sachs Global Leader Award is a remarkable achievement. Tell us about the project or initiative that led to this recognition, and any that you have built since.
I will keep going back to India, but one of the things that I think has led me to be recognized for some of these things is actually just the wonderful people who I've had the benefit of partnering with and whose work I've really supported. So this group in India, Community Development Projects, I had volunteered with them as throughout my teenage years, various times when I'd gone to India with my family. And that was one of the things, as well as what I mentioned earlier in terms of working in the Indigenous communities and beyond. The Goldman Sachs Award was also for some of my sort of academic achievements and some of the initiatives that I'd been part of in the business community as well. But in terms of how that has continued on, the India project that I was involved with as a teenager, I'm still a big supporter of. And in fact, we're in the midst of raising funds and pulling together the right partners to build a healthcare centre and to start a microfinance project in northern India, as well as sort of some community mental health projects and some medical clinics as well. So that's, I think these kind of long-term relationships with people who are doing incredible things has allowed me, I really can't take much credit for it, because it's actually just me being kind of grateful to be able to support these people and bring the right people along the journey. And anytime I've introduced people to this group in India, they've kind of been so inspired that they've become lifelong supporters as well. So I think that's been one of the main things. And then along the way, I know we'll talk about this a little later, but some of the other initiatives that I've been part of have been, again, in the healthcare community or in the impact investment space. And so all of that has sort of formed part of a body of work that all leads towards hopefully making the world a better place, and using business for good.
So your studies in international and global studies and international relations are diverse and impressive. How have these academic choices influenced your approach to leadership and conflict resolution? Are there any strategies that others can apply in complex negotiations or stakeholder management situations?
Yeah, absolutely. I studied international relations and international business management, and then I did a master's in peace and conflict studies. And as I was studying international relations, I realized that the relationship between nations is very much a shadow of just the relationship between human beings. International relations is really very similar to interhuman, interpersonal relations. And I think one of the things that I realized that I think people can apply in their own lives, in personal lives and also in their business lives, is that good conflict actually builds relationships. I think of some of the people who I know, who I'm very close friends with, who I may not have liked very much when I first met them. And in some cases, there was a little bit of a sense of, jarring, or people, us being at odds with one another. But over time, sometimes that conflict created the foundation for great honesty and a real authenticity in how we relate to each other. I think the way, though, because conflict can build or break relationships, and good conflict, as I said, builds relationships. So how does that work? First of all, I think you have to reframe conflict. So rather than it being seen as a negative thing, I think you need to see it as something that could actually be, first of all, that it's a natural part and a healthy part of relationships. Celebrate it. I tend to, I'm terrible at bowling. If you ever want to win at a game against me, you want to take me bowling. But one of the things that I learned to do, because I'm so bad at bowling, is just celebrate every time I throw the ball down the bowling aisle. And so I could walk away with none of those little pins falling down. My ball could be in the gutter, but I'm still cheering, because that's, I think, part of the way that you enjoy what should be an enjoyable pursuit, despite the fact that I'm so bad at it. And I think conflict is the same thing. Like, actually think that we can celebrate and kind of be self-reflexive in the midst of conflict. Often in the middle of conflict, because we're in emotion and we're often quite afraid of the outcomes of that conflict in terms of breaking relationship or leading to some kind of negative outcome on a personal or on a business level. We tend to stay in fight or flight mode. But if we pause, go, oh my gosh, we're having a fight, amazing, and sort of reframe it, then I think we're able to see it as quite a human, quite a natural, and quite a healthy thing. And then also, I think, when it comes to sort of negotiating, complex negotiations, or particularly in the business realm, understanding, again, taking the time, often one-on-one, to give people the space to share and to reveal what their real interests are. As in, they might be fighting for one thing from, ostensibly, by all appearances, it might be that they're fighting for one thing, but really at a base level, what is it that's driving them? And that might be something like a case of identity. It might be that they're feeling disrespected or overlooked. People make big decisions, not just on the basis of hard power or money or, control, but also on the basis of how something has made them feel. Have they been hurt by something? And so I think getting to the basis of that is where you find what the seed of the conflict is. And if you can relieve the pain and the pressure that's come from that seed of conflict, often it'll make the negotiation of the rest of it a lot easier. And I think the other two things I'd think about would be cultural sensitivity. So not just sort of ethnic culture, but also organizational culture and an individual's sort of family culture. Like, what are their thoughts? What is their culture around conflict? How are they used to engaging? They might come across as quite angry, but maybe they're from Italy. Maybe they're from the Middle East, which is part of my background as well. People are just a lot more passionate in these places. It's not necessarily it's not seen as a negative thing. And then the other thing is, where is there a power imbalance? So where might a person be feeling like they don't have power or control, or they feel like someone else is controlling them, and that might lead them to feel quite frustrated? And how can we, through the negotiation or through the sort of conflict resolution process, allow there to be an equalizing of that? And I think that was something which was seen in after the Rwandan genocide, when they had these courts in which people who previously had zero power, they had no power because they were being persecuted and targeted by other people within their country, were gifted the ability to make quite large decisions about the fate of their perpetrators. They could either forgive them or they could send them to jail or whatever. And I think correcting that power imbalance, in a lot of cases, they chose to forgive people. Because I think when you give people a sense of being empowered and take away their need to control, often they will react much more healthfully than they would otherwise.
So, what motivated you to become an ambassador for Mercy Ships, and what has been the most impactful aspect of your journey with them?
I from a combination of my studies and my travels and just sort of the life journey that I've taken, I realized that in order for the world to move forward, all that is required is a company of people operating in unity who are using their best ideas for the good of humanity. And the foundation of that is compassion. When I met the managing director of Mercy Ships in the APAC region, I was struck by the fact that he was a person of great intelligence and great integrity, who was using his best abilities in service of humanity. And he was a man who'd been tremendously successful and continues to be, very creative, a real sort of thinker. But he had seen a need, and he realized that his great talents and his great capacity was best applied to great problems, to solving huge issues. And I think it's through that, like with that realization, that actually we realize that global influence starts at a very grassroots level. It just starts with one person. It starts with really a simple driver, compassion, driving us towards applying our best resources for the greater good. And watching the way that he operated and that he still operates, that was really what inspired me to come on board with Mercy Ships as an ambassador. And at that point, Mercy Ships, which is a charity that operates really a lot in Africa, they build hospitals on ships and send them around Africa on medical missions. But I realized that, Australia is a country of great privilege. We've got such great resource, and yet there is so much need on our own doorstep. And it's our responsibility to serve those in need, whose lives we have the power to change with what could be a very small donation or a very small allocation of our time. And so when I came on board as an ambassador with Mercy Ships, I helped to facilitate a partnership with the United Nations that allowed us to work in the Pacific Islands in our region, and then also facilitated a partnership with the Community Development Project in India that allowed us to really extend our reach to India and also support the very important work that they've been doing there for decades. And so those were some of the sort of drivers behind what caused me to be a Mercy Ships ambassador. And I think through understanding both partnerships, but also understanding that when people work together, one person may have funding capacity, another person may have project management capabilities, another person is on the ground and has sort of real knowledge of the communities in which we're wanting to work. Another person might have relationship with a government or relationship with a World Health Organization. Someone else might have a technology platform. And I think what I've learned to do is bring together really diverse stakeholders and try to unify them around a project that could have a really strategic impact. And so through using the platform of Mercy Ships plus my own network, that's really what we've been working on doing. So at the moment, my projects that I'm working on are, as I mentioned, building the healthcare center in India with a microfinance project attached to that, and then also looking to develop a digital health platform that will really allow healthcare access in the developing world to become a lot more ubiquitous and a lot more sort of accessible to those who would otherwise find it quite difficult to even make use of government services that are available to them, but just might be a little far away from them. So that's what I've been up to.
Okay, amazing. So, successfully navigating the corporate and non-profit sectors requires unique skills. Could you share key strategies you've employed to cultivate effective partnerships across these diverse landscapes that could be valuable for others?
Yes, absolutely. I think, I'm big on relationship. I think that investing the time to build relationships with potential partners is time well spent. And for me, that involves a lot of, networking or sort of being in situations where I am forced to step out of my comfort zone and make conversation with people who I've never met before. But I think having those meaningful conversations and building the trust and rapport is really an essential foundation for a successful partnership. And I think when people, it's funny because the more people that you come across, the more people that you meet, particularly those who've been quite successful in life, I think people have a good sense for what you're, whether you're authentic, whether you're in it for the right reasons, what's really driving you. You can only pretend for so long. And it's not just pretending with others. I think it's pretending with ourselves. Like we can only pretend to ourselves for so long before we kind of implode. And so I think that it's, for me, like one of the keys to working together with other people and developing partnerships is making sure that there is like a really straight line when it comes to your intentions and and then what you're doing, like the projects that you're working on. For me, I'm the kind of person who I can't work on something for too long if I really don't believe in it. And you can tell pretty quickly. So I'm a little bit transparent, even when I don't want to be. And so I actually think that as much as it's a bit annoying sometimes because I wear my heart on my sleeve, but it's an asset because it means that I have to vet projects quite quickly and I can only really get involved in things that I really believe in. But in terms of then when you found something that you believe in, clear communication and authentic collaboration. So allowing people to feel heard, respected, and asking questions of the people around you. There are situations that I've been in where I could very easily tell people what to do and just kind of be straight down the line. Often I'll choose to ask questions. What do you think? How do you think that we should do this? Have you thought about this? And look, it may be less efficient sometimes. In fact, it almost certainly is, but it does get you the best of people. And I think when we are honestly and genuinely wanting to champion the best for others' lives, and even in a business situation, I think that really that puts us in good stead. We don't owe people, even if I pay someone, they don't actually owe me anything. In theory they do, like they should be doing their job, but I don't own their life. Like their time, they're still volunteering their time at some level because that is our most valuable resource. And I think when we understand that and treat people like that, and I'm, definitely not above reproach in all of this, but I'm trying. But I think that that's actually a really great foundation for building sort of ongoing partnerships. Even if a person leaves your organization or finds themselves in a different situation, you'll find that down the track, things always come back to you. And the world is big, but the world is very small at the same time. So the number of times that I've been in a situation where I've seen someone who I hadn't seen in years, who I maybe never thought I'd see again, and they end up becoming a real partner in something that I'm working on, or introducing me to someone else who becomes quite a strategic ally in some of these projects. I've lost count of how many times this has happened. And so I think it's really important to build partnerships on the basis of authentic relationship, and learn open communication and genuinely care for people. Those are my basics.
Genuinely care for people. It's like quotes which people should actually be practicing now. That's one of the aim for us doing this. Like we want to bring in people who are genuinely doing things and then bring them together so that we can help each other at one point. Maybe I am not so good at this, as you said. There are a lot of people involved in doing maybe one single thing, but we all need everyone at one point to help us out.
Yeah, absolutely. No man is an island, as they say.
Yes. Okay. So what inspired the creation of the Global Family Office Bioforum, and how do you envision its future development?
So the Global Family Office Bioforum was something that I co-founded when I was working for a quite significant US-based family office. A family office is sort of an ultra high net worth family. So they often will have, significant investable funds or funds that they are donating to charity. And in working with this family, I realized, we were working on some pretty large scale global health problems and trying to entice other private capital allocators to use their funds, their investment funds and their philanthropic funds to solve big issues, in particular in the healthcare space. I think we realized that the healthcare and life science sector is one of the few sectors where you can invest on a for-profit basis and you can still do good with that money. And so the Global Family Office Buyout Forum was a space in which myself and another couple of people who I was working with, we would facilitate roundtable discussions all around the world. I think we did around 20 cities around the world on 3 or 4 continents. And those conversations were, normally sort of 15 to 25 people. They were decision makers, capital allocators, or the heads of research labs and, heads of centers for excellence or universities or government representatives. And we were really getting together to talk about the best use of for-profit and non-profit funding in the preventative health space, and in life sciences, early stage diagnostic tools, utilizing lifestyle interventions to prevent or reduce the burden of disease and the cost of care in countries. And I think through building that network, I realized 2 things. I realized the power of network, and I also realized that in order for a network to be really, really powerful, it needs to operationalize some of the theories that we were talking about. And so the future for me, I think, one of the things I would love to do in life is to create a series of these kinds of forums where people can get together and not just talk about how to change the world, but also operationalize those plans and develop really key collaborations in different impact sectors. So healthcare, education, all these different spaces where even, sustainability and the environment, all these spaces where I think these huge problems require huge collaborations. And it's just individual people who sometimes have the ability to move the needle on these things. But if you bring them together and they work together, that's when you see really effective partnerships happening.
So, as a keynote speaker at international conferences, what message do you aim to convey to your audience, and what drives you to share it?
One of my passion points is impact investment and venture philanthropy. And so a lot of the time, because I've worked with many, many family offices and have relationship with many family offices around the world and sort of ultra high net worth investors and philanthropists, one of the things that I'm often asked to speak about is trends in the impact investment space and the future of venture philanthropy, particularly in sort of healthcare, education, and sustainability. The reason that I continue to do that, and in some cases it's voluntary, in some cases it's a big allocation of my time, and also there is expenses to travel to these places. But the reason that I do it is because I think that influence today, a lot of it looks like soft power, and a lot of that soft power is concentrated into the hands of people who not a lot of people know who they are even. And I think if we have the opportunity to influence those people in the direction that they allocate their capital or the direction that the things that they get passionate about, then that's a really, really worthwhile thing to do. And so, yeah, I kind of continue to put myself in positions where I sometimes have to or have the opportunity to speak to groups of people, whether it be small or large, about thoughtfulness in terms of the way that they're allocating their capital, and also to sort of open their eyes to what the future might look like and how they can be part of that. So a lot of the time I'm at sort of investment conferences or moments where the international community comes together, like the UN General Assembly or Davos with the World Economic Forum, and those kinds of forums where you get to see an interdisciplinary group of people get together to discuss big issues and also big sort of innovation trends and look at the direction that the world is going and how we can all be part of shaping that.
So, as a leader in growth strategy and impact investment at WeThink, what are, in your view, the biggest challenges and opportunities in this field? How have you addressed these challenges to drive positive outcomes?
Well, one of the things that I do a lot of work in is the impact investment space, as I mentioned. And I think that some of the interesting things that I've seen along the way will be, things in the area of housing, things in the area of healthcare. And so I see some of those things as some of the biggest challenges in the world. I think when there's a big challenge, there's also a big opportunity. And often great investments start by seeing a big problem. In, for example, the healthcare space, something like 40% of chronic diseases can be prevented just through lifestyle interventions. And so there's so much investment going into, finding into drug discovery and spaces where there are very binary outcomes, and there's a need for huge capital intensive investment to fund these breakthroughs. And it's fantastic. It needs to absolutely continue. But at the same time, if we have a pretty clear pathway to prevention, and that's going to lead to not just better healthcare outcomes, but also better quality of life and a lower burden of cost for governments around the world, which are already struggling under the weight of healthcare costs, particularly in the wake of COVID. I think it's really important for us to center and encourage people to invest into some of those solutions. So whether it be, platforms for lifestyle interventions or mental health technologies to enable mental health management, those kinds of things I think are huge opportunities and are really important. I also see opportunity in the space of housing. Last year, I worked with a fund called Hope Housing in Australia, and they really kind of had invented quite a novel approach to investing into the homes of essential workers. So people like nurses, teachers, doctors, police people, or maybe not doctors actually, because they tend to make quite good money, but other essential workers, but enabling them to buy homes closer to the communities that they're serving through co-investing into their homes. And that to me is a really interesting solution. It means an investor can get a return and can simultaneously get an aggregated exposure to residential property. But at the same time, the benefit of having an essential worker that lives in the community that they are serving is huge. Not just for their own family's benefit, but for the community. I think, we've seen over and over again that, for example, healthcare outcomes are better and crime drops when locals are employed in positions of law enforcement and sort of medical help. And so having locals who are able to serve their own communities, there's also a greater longevity in terms of people who are in these essential roles, because they don't have these long commutes. They're not just being drained through those lifestyle factors. So those kinds of things I think are really interesting approaches to huge problems. I think looking at some of the sustainability solutions that I'm seeing in terms of circular economy and, taking waste and turning it into energy or commodities or resources, those kinds of things I think are fantastic solutions. I think, as much as we need to all be vigilant around our own environmental footprint, looking at larger scale solutions where you can actually kind of expand the capacity of the world essentially to sustain human life and to sustain biodiversity and so on. Those things are really interesting to me. And I think we're seeing some more forays into using, kind of clean energy technologies to, again, be capacity building for the earth, for the lungs of the earth. And so looking at some of those solutions, I think there's some huge opportunity there. So I think the future, as much as there's a lot of worry about the future, and particularly, on an environmental level and on a social level, and we're in the midst of so many international conflicts, But I like to think that there's also a lot of hope as humanity's best minds are applying themselves to some of these big problems.
Reflecting on your career, what project or initiative presented the most significant challenges and how did you overcome them?
I've had a couple of sort of challenging situations throughout my career. One of them was in a consulting company that I used to work with, and we just had a couple of business partnerships that weren't really going very well, and I had to take a step back and sort of analyze whether or not these partnerships were working, and in some cases, let go of strategic partners or sort of try to renegotiate contracts. And in the midst of that, it's funny because there was the difficulty in terms of actually the work, right? Like renegotiating something or saying goodbye to a business partner is never easy. But in the midst of it, actually probably one of my biggest challenges was overcoming fear, my own fear of how I would be perceived, or, if someone was going to not like me, which was just like awful to think about. Like, but I'm such a nice person. How could you not like me? And like really having to kind of do the internal work. And again, I'm so grateful to have a family that's been so supportive, and friends who've really taken the time to sit with me and debrief stuff and be supportive to me in those moments. But it's funny, there are so many external challenges that we face. But for me, I think a lot of my challenges have been internal, learning how to manage myself, manage my emotions, and not kind of get stuck or paralyzed through fear. I think people often see us as being quite confident and competent, depending on how we present ourselves. But it's often those people, and this is, I think, a good reminder for us, it's often the people who appear the most confident, who really struggle the most with their own self-esteem. And, I think we were all shocked when we have seen comedians or incredibly successful people who've had some really, really dark times, and in some cases even taken their own lives. And it's so unfathomable to think that those kinds of people could be facing some really dark struggles. But I have had more than my fair share, I think, of dark nights of the soul. And I look back at some of those really challenging moments, and for whatever reason, I actually feel really grateful. I feel grateful not just that I've come through them, but I also feel grateful because I feel like not everyone, it's a privilege actually to go through struggles. Some people live an incredibly comfortable, easy life, and that's so great for them. But they don't get to develop resilience. They don't get to develop character. Their integrity is never tested. Their ethics all exist in the realm of theory. They don't actually get to sort of test their own metal, like what are they actually made of? And I feel like the substance, like of our core, is hardened and refined in the crucible of difficult times. And I have certainly felt like I've gone through some of those. And I think that's really what's allowed me to relate to people from all different walks of life, from great success to people on the street. And so as much as I would not wish those things on anyone, I'm also really grateful for some of those struggles. Yeah.
So it's something related to my next question as well. Leadership often demands tough choices. Can you share an example of a difficult decision you faced and the lessons you learned from it?
Yeah. I mentioned earlier this company that I used to work with and having to let go of a business partnership. When I look back at how I did that, and a couple of key times that I've had to, well, haven't had to, but I've chosen to either let go of an employee or facilitate, the breaking up of business partnership that has not been fruitful, I definitely would do things differently in some cases. I think sometimes it's been a case of there needing to be more clear and open communication, particularly with the person who is being let go of. I think that we are often afraid of what might come back if we give a person the truth, if we tell them why this isn't working out, or if we kind of, just try to, I don't know, couch things a little bit rather than just being really clear and straight cut. I realized that sometimes clarity is kindness. And in a couple of situations that I look back on where I, again, sort of facilitated, a difficult thing, like a business breakup. I think one of the things I could have done better is have some more open conversations along the way and not just rely on someone else to communicate what I really should have communicated. So I'm, it's probably more of a confession rather than something to say, hey, look at me, emulate what I did. but I do think I definitely can learn to, to do that better, to just have those conversations, have those difficult conversations, not wait until things get to breaking point, but preempt them. And I also think in situations where there is a risk of miscommunication, being super quick to pick up the phone and not text someone, not email them, unless you need to have things in writing, but actually have a conversation. And so one of the things I've learned is to pick up the phone, have a quick conversation or a long conversation, give that conversation whatever the time it needs, and then maybe send a follow-up email to say, just so we're clear, this is what I think that we said and what we agreed on. Am I correct? And would you agree with that? I think just, understanding that people can't read tone as much as we can try to, unless you put a lot of exclamation points in which case I think everyone sounds happy. But one of the things that I've realized is picking up the phone and having that human conversation and not being afraid to have the hard conversation, and then, confirm things in writing afterwards is, one of the ways to make sure that even if there is a renegotiation or a reshaping of a partnership or the breaking up of a business partnership, you might be able to actually maintain the relationship and you could still be champions of each other in the future. And potentially there may be the opportunity to collaborate down the track.
A good takeaway, but I'm not sure how far things would work like that, because picking up a phone and talking, having a conversation is the most difficult. But as you said, if it does work, then it's the best thing which we can happen. Yeah,
it's true. But I think sometimes also the first step when we pick up the phone is not just to jump straight into the conversation of like, what do we need to, what's business, but also to share, vulnerability begets vulnerability. If I tell you where I'm at and my intention, that sets the tone. So if I pick up the phone and I say, hey, I just wanted to, really kind of let you know where I'm at, and my intention in this is actually not to do you harm. I'm wanting to do good. I want to see the best for you. My intention is to actually move us into a situation that's workable, even if it means that we have to renegotiate the way that we're working together. I think that helps to bring down walls a little bit. And I think it's also sometimes worth being vulnerable and just saying, listen, I said something in haste the other day, or I feel like I may have been misunderstood and I'm sorry. And just apologizing, even preemptively, can be a really powerful tool to just open up a deeper level of communication in those situations.
This is something which I need to ask you. Imagine it's 2040. You've achieved your most audacious goals. What does your journey and impact look like? What challenges did you overcome, and what unexpected opportunities arose?
What a great question.
I didn't send this one to you.
I love it. A sneaky question. Okay, wait, what are we in 2024? Okay, so I'd love to see this happen. All right, it's 2040. We have eradicated poverty. People are living healthier longer and are not reliant, for the most part, on pharmaceuticals or drugs, but they're living healthy and fulfilling lives. everyone has found their purpose. No one is working in a job that they don't love. You said to be audacious, right? Families are happy and strong. People's relationships and marriages are flourishing. There is a forum in which world leaders, country leaders get together and have really honest conversations, and we no longer resort to physical war in order to bring peace in these kinds of situations like the ones that we're seeing at the moment. Humanity is no longer reliant on fossil fuels. We're living in a place of abundance, and the food system has been entirely sort of rejuvenated and regenerated to be regenerative, essentially. People are eating healthy organic food, and it doesn't cost them an arm and a leg. And the education system has been reshaped so that what people are learning is how to think and how to be, and they're learning the skills that they need to be great stewards of technology, rather than just to, how to do a job that will probably quite soon be defunct, given the advances in artificial intelligence and beyond. So those are just a few of my audacious goals. Yeah, I think I'd be quite happy if all those things happened.
Okay, so what question are you most often asked and you wish people would ask instead?
Oh gosh, that's a really tricky question. I actually don't know. People often ask what my background is, like what my ethnicity is. But I'm actually quite happy sharing about that. So I don't mind if they do that. I really like talking about that kind of stuff because I think it's part of what makes us who we are. I mentioned my dad's from India, my mum's from Jerusalem, and I feel like I'm a walking melting pot. So I quite like that as like the basis for a conversation and for a bit of human connection. So I know I didn't really answer your question, but I'm quite happy with the question that I get asked the most.
No problems there. Okay, so today, if you could change one thing about the world around you, what it would be and why?
I would take away fear. I would remove fear from the world. Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that so often we hem ourselves in and reduce our possibilities to the level of what we see as our capacity or our potential. And a lot of that is based on fear of what people would think, fear of risk. I think if, a lot of the misunderstandings between human beings are based on fear of otherness or fear of people who are different to us. And so if I could take away fear, then that would be something I would do first.
And so finally, imagine you're designing a virtual reality experience aimed at inspiring young people to become change makers.
Oh.
What would the key elements be, and what message would you want them to walk away with?
Oh, that's so interesting. So I'm designing an experience to allow young people to become change makers. I think that there would be two key elements to it, right? Part of the reason that people don't become change makers is because they feel like they need to cater to their own needs first, or they feel, and often that comes from a sense of lack, oh, I might not have enough, or I need to be better, or I'm not good enough, I need to prove myself. And so that's why they focus themselves on themselves rather than having enough abundance of spirit and wholeness of heart to be able to serve those around them. And so I think the first step that I would put in there is identity formation, allowing people to really understand who they are and the fact that they have not been created just for their own benefit, but they've been created and they've been resourced, and it's their joy and their privilege to serve others. And that would be additive. That won't be taking away something from them, but that will be adding something to their lives. They'll find themselves living from a place of much greater joy and abundance. So I would start with the identity thing. And then I think I would also add probably an element of inspiration and an element of exploration. So something to inspire them to do something bigger than what they may have hoped for or dreamed of previously, something to open up and expand their possibilities, and then also something to open their eyes to the fact that there is so much need in the world beyond what they can see with their own two eyes. And to remind them that even if it feels like it's on the other side of the world and that they can't or don't need to make a difference, they can and that they do need to. And so those are, I would, yeah, in terms of how I would do that, probably have to consult with a technology expert. But I would definitely try to make it experiential and immersive, and probably have them actually have conversations, even virtual conversations, with people on the other side of the world, and allow them to relate on a human level with those that they could be helping. Because I think that's really what anchors it. The human connection is what anchors the desire to create change.
That was so great, gracefully said.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of the session. So thank you so much for being part of this,
Thank you.
Grace. And I know you are such a busy person, and still giving me the time to have a conversation on behalf of myself and the entire team. We are so grateful to have you as on
Thank you.
Herald Women's Voice Club.
Thank you. It's been a real privilege to share with you, and thank you so much for taking the time. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great to chat.